The first thing I noticed was not the knife. It was a look in my wife's eyes when she picked it up. We were standing in the middle of our baby's shower, surrounded by balloons, gifts, family photographs, and 2 cribs decorated with blue and white ribbons. Everyone had been laughing only seconds earlier. Then Emily suddenly grabbed a kitchen knife from the dessert table, held it against her chest, and screamed, "These twins aren't yours." The room went completely silent. I didn't move. I didn't shout. I didn't even ask what she meant. I simply stared at her, because deep inside me, something terrified had just clicked into place. For months, Emily had been strangely protective of her phone, secretive about doctor appointments, and nervous whenever I asked about the twins. I had convinced myself it was pregnancy stress. But now, in front of everyone we loved, she said the one sentence I had secretly feared without ever admitting it to myself. My brother-in-law slowly stepped between Emily and the guests while my mother called the police. Emily dropped the knife almost immediately and began crying. She kept repeating that she didn't mean to say it, that she was scared, and that everyone had misunderstood her. But nobody could unhear those words. I couldn't either. One of our relatives asked me if I wanted to leave the house, but I stayed. I needed answers. When the police arrived, they separated Emily from everyone and asked what had happened. She told them she had suffered a panic attack. According to her, she had become overwhelmed by the attention and accidentally said something that made no sense. I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe her. After all, these were supposed to be the happiest days of our lives. We had spent years talking about having children, but as I watched Emily avoid my eyes, I realized there was something she was terrified I might discover. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the living room while Emily stayed upstairs. I couldn't sleep. Every photograph from the baby's shower seemed to mock me. In every picture, I was smiling beside her with my hands resting proudly over her stomach. I remembered how excited I had been when we learned we were expecting twins. I had painted the nursery myself. I had assembled the cribs. I had even written 2 names on small wooden signs because Emily insisted we wait before choosing them officially. Yet there had always been strange gaps in her stories. She sometimes disappeared for hours and claimed she had been shopping. She had started locking her phone. She received calls from an unknown number and would leave the room to answer them. Whenever I asked who it was, she said it was nothing. I had accepted those explanations because I trusted my wife. But that night, trust began to feel less like love and more like something I had used to protect myself from the truth. The next morning, Emily apologized. She sat across from me at the kitchen table with swollen eyes and trembling hands. She said she had been afraid of losing me. I asked her one question. Why did you say the twins weren't mine? She stared at the table for nearly a minute before whispering, "Because you're going to find out anyway." My heart sank. I asked her what I was going to find out. She wouldn't answer. Instead, she begged me not to leave her until the babies were born. That made everything worse. If there was nothing to hide, why would she need me to stay? I told her I wasn't going anywhere yet, but I needed the truth. She began crying again and said there was another person involved. She wouldn't give me his name. Then she said something that stayed in my mind all day. "There is a place you don't know about." When I asked where, she became completely silent. I started searching for that place without telling her. I didn't invade her phone or threaten her. I simply began paying attention. 2 days later, I noticed an envelope inside the glove compartment of her car. It contained a receipt from a storage facility across town. The rental was under Emily's name, and the payment covered nearly a full year. I had never heard of the facility. My hands shook when I saw the date the unit had first been rented. It was almost exactly when Emily had started acting differently. I drove there that afternoon. I expected to find boxes, old furniture, maybe things she didn't have room for at home. Instead, when the manager opened the unit, I saw something that made my stomach turn. The room was not filled with storage boxes. It was a nursery. 2 fully assembled cribs stood against the wall. There were baby clothes, bottles, blankets, toys, and even a rocking chair. Everything had been carefully prepared. But the most disturbing thing wasn't the nursery. It was the name painted across the wall. It wasn't my name. It wasn't Emily's name. Written in large wooden letters above the cribs was the name Daniel. Underneath it were two smaller names, one for each baby. I stood there frozen, trying to understand what I was seeing. Why would my pregnant wife secretly build a nursery in a storage unit? Why would another man's name be on the wall? Then I noticed photographs pinned beside the cribs. Some showed Emily standing beside a man I had never seen before. In one photograph, he had his hand resting gently on her stomach. In another, they were standing outside what looked like a medical clinic. I felt my entire body go cold. The answer seemed obvious, but I couldn't accept it. I took pictures of everything and left without touching anything else. I knew that if I confronted Emily immediately, she might destroy whatever evidence remained. So I went home and waited. That evening, Emily asked why I had been gone so long. I told her I had been helping a friend. She believed me, or at least she pretended to. Later, while she slept, I looked at the baby names she had written in her notebook. They matched the names on the storage unit wall. That was when I understood the nursery hadn't been created recently. Emily had planned those children's lives long, before I knew anything about them. But one question kept haunting me. If Daniel was a father, why had Emily allowed me to believe the twins were mine? The next morning, I contacted an attorney and quietly arranged for a private DNA test after the babies were born. I also gave the storage unit photographs to the police because the situation was becoming too strange to handle alone. The officer who reviewed them asked me whether I knew Daniel. I said no. He looked at the photographs again and told me something I hadn't expected. Daniel's name had appeared in an old missing person investigation. That revelation changed everything. The police began investigating Daniel. They discovered that he had once worked with Emily at a medical supply company. According to their records, he had disappeared nearly a year earlier after leaving town unexpectedly. Emily had told me she barely knew him, but police found messages between them showing they had been secretly involved. I felt betrayed, but there was something even more disturbing. Daniel wasn't simply another man Emily had dated. He had been married before, and his wife had reported him missing after he stopped coming home. The investigation also revealed that Emily had been meeting him secretly during the early months of her pregnancy. Suddenly, her strange behavior made sense. The secret appointments, the hidden phone, the storage unit, the nursery, the other man's name. Everything pointed toward one terrifying possibility. Emily had built a second life around those babies while keeping me trapped inside the first one. But there was still something that didn't make sense. If Daniel had disappeared, why had Emily continued preparing the nursery? Police questioned her again. This time, she finally broke down. She admitted that Daniel was a biological father of the twins, but she insisted she had never planned to hurt me. She said Daniel had promised to leave his wife and build a family with her. When she became pregnant, he told her he was ready. They rented the storage unit together and prepared everything there because Emily was afraid I would discover the affair. Then, shortly before the baby's shower, Daniel vanished. Emily said she had tried calling him repeatedly, but his phone had been disconnected. She had no idea where he was. She kept the nursery because she believed he would eventually return. But that still didn't explain why she had screamed that the twins weren't mine in front of everyone. The answer came from something the police found inside Daniel's old apartment. There was a handwritten letter addressed to Emily. In it, Daniel confessed that he had been hiding another secret. He wasn't planning to leave his wife. He had been using Emily because he wanted money from her. When she became pregnant, he panicked and disappeared. The nursery had never been part of his plan. It had been part of hers. Emily had believed his promises so completely that she had built an entire future around a man who never intended to share it with her. The night before the baby's shower, she had received a message from an unknown number containing photographs of Daniel with another woman. She realized she had been deceived. During the baby's shower, surrounded by people celebrating what she thought was her perfect family, the pressure finally broke her. She grabbed the knife, not because she intended to attack anyone, but because she was terrified and emotionally collapsing under the weight of everything she had hidden. I still needed to know whether the twins were actually mine. Months of uncertainty ended when the babies were born. They were healthy, beautiful, and completely innocent. The DNA results confirmed what Emily had already admitted. I was not their biological father. For a few minutes, I couldn't breathe. I had spent months imagining myself holding them, teaching them to walk, taking them to school, and protecting them from every danger in the world. Biology had suddenly told me that none of that belonged to me. But when I looked at those two tiny faces, something inside me changed. They hadn't betrayed me. They hadn't lied to me. They hadn't chosen Daniel. They were two innocent children who had entered a world filled with secrets they never asked for. I told Emily that I couldn't remain married to her, but I also refused to punish the babies for the choices of adults. Whatever happened next, they deserved stability, love, and protection. Divorce was painful, but the truth eventually became easier to live with than the lies. Emily lost my trust, and I couldn't rebuild a marriage on top of what she had done. Daniel was eventually located through the investigation, and his disappearance turned out to be an attempt to escape the consequences of his own actions. He faced legal problems connected to financial fraud, while Emily had to deal with the consequences of the affair and the deception surrounding the pregnancy. The secret nursery was eventually emptied. I remember standing there one final time, looking at the two cribs that had once represented a future built on lies. I could have walked away from everything. Instead, I chose to remain involved in the children's lives as much as legally appropriate. I wasn't their biological father, but I had loved them before I knew the truth. And sometimes love doesn't disappear simply because a DNA test changes a name on a piece of paper. Years later, I still remember that baby shower. I remember the balloons, the laughter, the photographs, and the sudden silence after Emily screamed those words. At the time, I thought the worst part was discovering that my wife had betrayed me. But I eventually realized the real danger had been the secret life she built while everyone around her believed everything was normal. The hidden nursery wasn't just a room filled with cribs and baby clothes. It was proof that an entire future had been planned behind my back. And the name on that wall was the first clue that finally forced the truth into the light. I learned something I will never forget. Sometimes the biggest warning isn't the lie someone tells you. It's the strange detail they desperately hope you will never notice. Emily wanted to hide a second family. Instead, she accidentally left the evidence waiting for me to find it.